Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we review our favorite RPGs, collectible card games, MMOs, video games, PC games, and bring up interesting topics and things that we'd like to share with everyone. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion to Ragnarok story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and rpgpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Panel is Kickstarter. Is it still a thing? A couple of years ago, we did a Kickstarter panel. A couple of years ago, Kickstarter was more new, more fresh, and a lot of people were looking to, were curious about it or looking to run a Kickstarter and things like that. And this room was packed with people who were, and we had like 10 panelists, some of which had run Kickstarters for role-playing games, some of which run Kickstarters for board games, some of which did both maybe, and there were a lot of different, it was neat because we got a lot of different perspectives on Kickstarter and a lot of different the different genres have different approaches and different ways to look at them. Then we did, the following year we had a similar panel. Some of the things that we talked about were how Kickstarter changed over time and like it evolved. People were getting better at it, and so were the consumers were looking for different things and some stuff like that. In the last year there weren't as many people in the panel, and so that while Kickstarter's still out there, it's not like people aren't using Kickstarter to fund things, and more people than ever are using Kickstarter to fund things. But I was wondering if that meant if people were just kind of felt like they'd been to that panel already because it was just the Kickstarter panel. We didn't really have anything specific. So this year I tried to maybe make it more specific, and I noticed a couple of things about Kickstarter. People have been talking for years about Kickstarter fatigue, or with Kickstarter stopped working, or people stopped shopping on it. It's pretty clear people haven't stopped shopping on it, but it's definitely still changing. So my question now is Kickstarter still a thing? Is it still a big deal? Or is it just, okay, it's a part of life, people fund things on Kickstarter, we go about our business? And one thing that's definitely still changing about it, as by way of example, is Taste of Minstrel just ran a Kickstarter for an expansion. The expansion was to a game that was on Kickstarter a few years ago. The game got funded very well. It was called Kings of Air and Steam. It was a good game. It came out. And the expansion did not, the goal was $30,000 and it did not fund. And nowadays, $30,000 isn't even that much for a board game, necessarily. So one might think, hey, this is a no-brainer. It was a successfully funded game, a game people like. It's a $30,000 goal for expansion. Recently, we did expansion to Scoville, which did fund at that level, and Scoville is a similar priced game to Kings of Air and Steam, but it didn't fund. So one thing I'm curious about is, and maybe we can talk about this as sort of a discussion, is Kickstarter still a thing? Is the reason it didn't fund related to how people use Kickstarter, or what other reasons might there be that something like that wouldn't fund? And then other things like if you're starting a Kickstarter now compared to doing it a couple of years ago, like what new considerations or what's different now than it used to be, and what to watch out for. So if anyone else has anything specific they want to talk about, there's only 4 of us, might as well talk about whatever it is that you have to say. I guess there's no one else on the panel, so either I'm the authority or we have a discussion. I think discussion seems more appropriate. So what do you guys think? Who has run a Kickstarter campaign? Okay, who has bought things on Kickstarter? And who is thinking about running a campaign in the future? Okay, great.
Currently running.
Currently running. Yeah, for your what's it called again? It's
Durable and Shuffle.
So what's the first word again?
Durable and Shuffle.
Durable. Is that what is that? Is that the name of? Is that a made up word or is that a thing?
Yeah. Okay. Name of the world.
Name of the world. Got it. Okay. I had trouble remembering it because it was a made up thing, but I'm not familiar with the world. But also because I only glanced at it one time, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. How is your Kickstarter doing right now?
It's got 600 out of 10 grand.
How long has it been running?
It's only been running a few days.
Okay. And how long do you have on the total?
End of October.
Okay, so you basically have a month to raise 10 grand, right? What have you done to, I don't know, what avenues are you going to try to get people attention on your Kickstarter?
Basically telling everyone I know.
Okay.
And hoping to come down and promote it at this convention too. But
Okay. How much is the one copy of your game, whatever?
$25.
So you pledge level is 25, and you need 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
About 400 or 500 games.
400 or 500. So do you know 400 or 500 people, like
I do not.
personally? Okay. So what does that tell us? That means you're probably going to need to find more avenues to get people to look at it. You just had a game fund recently, yeah? How many people did you have in your group?
120.
120. And at about what price?
The average was, the most common was 32.
30. Okay, 30 something. And so you funded. What was your goal?
2,500.
2,500. So that's a lot different goal. So I'll preface by saying that like there's no right or wrong. Like having a high goal, having a low goal, there's no right or wrong in general. There might be a right or wrong for a particular project, and maybe that's one of the problems with Kingsbury and Steam World Fair was maybe we asked for too much money. Who knows? What avenues did you use to get your people to find your game?
Yeah, so we,
And I'm sorry, how many people did you say?
120.
100. So how did you find those people?
So we brought the game around and played it with people everywhere for like a year, and then we had a failed Kickstarter back in December, and that was $8,000, so we lowered our goal to 2,500. And then on the first like few days, we organized like 30 or 40 people that we actually knew to pledge and make it look good, and we
Like
funded
momentum, right? To show some momentum.
right. So because that makes it look better to random people.
There is something to be said about that. From the beginning,
Yeah.
Michael Minnis from TMG has always said that like, social proof and momentum is a big thing. Like if people look at a thing and it's been running for a week and there's 2 people pledging, they're like, it must not be that good or something like that,
Yeah.
and they'll skip it. So early pledges are way better than late pledges.
And there's this thing like the nightclub industry. If there's a line outside of a club,
It must be hip.
People want to go in there because
Yeah.
it must be.
it's
awesome.
popular. It's popular.
Right.
Starbucks.
Keep the line out there even for clubs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a thing, and people's minds work that way, right? So you said you took it around and played it everywhere. Define everywhere.
Let's see. The number of people we exposed it to before we actually launched the second Kickstarter was probably close to 100.
Okay.
We played it at last year's convention. We played it at
Last year's Tucson convention.
Yeah, Tucson convention. I demoed at game stores here in Phoenix. Played with random people at board game nights. Sent it out to reviewers. Some prototypes out to reviewers. And so a lot of people had sort of heard about it before.
Cool.
Kickstarter.
So that's good. I mean that's the kind of thing I do is find people to play it, right? So I'll notice that with the exception of sending out to reviewers, you're still geographically located to Tucson and Phoenix. So I mean that's more people than just RinCon, but it's you're reaching. And you were only you needed 2,500. You only needed to reach 100 people or so. But I'm kind of curious how many people you played it with back versus how many people watched the reviews, because I mean some number of people, I don't know which reviewers you had, but some of these reviewers get lots of views, and I'm not sure. I'm curious what the distribution would be.
The reviewers didn't do that much, but they at least they gave our game some validity. When we scroll down, you look at the page, and
You can say you can post.
reviewer.
Oh look, a review.
Yep.
Okay, and you were able to do that. You were only looking to get $2,500 because you determined that was like the cheapest you could possibly.
Yeah,
get
the
for.
very minimum we could print for and not lose any money just from the printing. Because even though we'd spent other money before, this is how much we need to print it. We can either print it and still be down the money we've already spent, or we could not print it and still be down the money we've already spent. So I did
Right.
that's why I want to find the minimum.
And then in the end, how much did you end up raising?
5,500.
Right. So you got more than your minimum stuff.
Mhm.
In the end, did you end up breaking even at least after shipping them all? Or have you finished?
We just finished putting together this past week. We'll be shipping them starting now. I think we're looking at about break even. Then we have extra 125 copies.
Cool. So you break even. So break even. At least you didn't lose any money, and you got some copies to sell. What was I always, when I talk about Kickstarter, I always ask like or talk about your goal. What was your personal? Were you looking to get into distribution, or were you just trying to make the game and get it out there?
We wanted to make a game and get it out there, so we had a product, and then we wanted to launch future games.
Cool. So, and do you feel like you're were successful in doing that?
Yeah.
It sounds like you were. As long as you were, if your goal was to get on Barnes & Noble shelf and all the game store shelves, that's a little bit of a different situation, and it takes different action.
Yeah, you gotta be optimistic and realistic at the same time.
Right. Now, you were looking for $10,000, so you're going to need a lot bigger audience than what he had. And how did you come to $10,000? Was that?
It was the least I felt I could do a print run of the games for.
Okay, and you're going to print how many? You printed 275
Yeah.
copies.
Minimum order size was 1,000.
Because you're going to go with a bit of a bigger scale production, so you're going to make 1,000 copies. It's going to cost you however much, and you need like $10,000 to cover that. So let me ask you this: as far as your goals are concerned, is what are you going to do with those once you get them? Are you going to send them out to? You try to get into stores, or are you trying to sell them out of your garage, or what?
Ideally, game stores would start picking this up.
Okay.
If we get them with a distributor.
Okay.
Failing that, that's a number of copies I feel like I could sell over time.
Okay, yeah. So I mean,
after I shipped out my Kickstarter rewards and everything.
Sure. And both lots of different ways are valid. Some people would put them in the garage and maybe bring a few to every convention they go to and sell them, or sell them on Craigslist or Amazon if you can get in there. Other people might try to get in with the distributor and get stores to sell them. It sounds like what you're after. That's what Tasty Minstrel has done. Tasty Minstrel, being a game publishing company, was intending to be and was in fact already a game publishing company, albeit a very small one made of like 1.5 people, when it did its first Kickstarter. But the goal for Tasty Minstrel was always to fund the print run. You send out your backers copies, and then you have a bunch that go into distribution. That was our goal. And we ended up going through PSI as a fulfillment service. And I if you're trying to do distribution, your choices are contact all the distributors yourself and do a lot of that kind of thing, which if you're into, more power to you. But I usually advise going through a fulfillment company. They take a cut, it's a pretty small cut, and they do a lot of the work I would want to do. So I don't know if you've looked into that, but I recommend you do. At least look into it and see what because otherwise you have to communicate directly with at least one and probably 3 or more distributors and constantly be trying to get them to buy your stuff from you so that they'll sell it to retailers, and it's not. I mean, I don't think it's fun.
It's a lot of legwork.
You might be more into that kind of thing, and maybe you.
Oh, I'm not.
Maybe you do that kind of thing, but I mean, for me, I would be like, I just want to work on the next game, So you had a Kickstarter, you said?
It was just a small Kickstarter for our podcast. Just
Okay.
get some new equipment.
Okay, so that's an interesting. That's
Yeah.
a different project, right? You had a podcast. What were your reward levels? Like, what did you give out?
Basically, it was for the podcast for advertising. Was one of the big ones, as well as we're going to be making some audio dramas. So it was, hey, do you want to be a character on the show? We can do a quick
cool.
Skype in where you can play the character.
Yeah, I've always wondered how well that goes over. Like, I've never done a
We-
Kickstarter for anything that wasn't a game. So
We asked for a ridiculous small amount, $400,
Okay.
and we hit it by 180%.
So you got like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not doing math right
And
now.
we just succeeded like
700.
2 days ago. So
Oh, okay.
and-
It's
yeah,
decent. I didn't
yeah.
realize. I didn't even know that was up. Okay, so you got
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, so-
and how much? And you're using that to what? Pay for
more audio equipment, and we wanted to work on getting some digital equipment. So basically, warble boards. So
And is $700 or whatever enough
yeah.
to afford
Oh
this?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. We basically kept it really small.
80%.
180%. Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
$400.
What's your podcast?
Creative Play and Podcast Network.
Creative what?
Creative Play and Podcast Network. Plus, we do D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. It's basically we play D&D as a real play podcast.
Oh yeah.
And Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Star, where we play Scion RPG.
And
Fun
I
little
remember-
RPGs.
So most of your stuff is all roleplay related.
Yeah, usually role play or gaming related.
Yeah, and I remember one time I came on there and you interviewed me about RinCon.
For RinCon, yeah.
For like a year ago.
Yeah. For last year.
More of that.
What's that? Yeah, dude. By all means.
Great. So we have a couple of different perspectives here, two different scopes of a board game project and then a podcast project. So you were successful. You're trying to be successful. We don't know yet. Have you done ones in the past? And run any Kickstarter projects in the past, or is this all basically your first ones?
That was my first one.
Okay.
My first failed, like I said.
Right, and okay, and you think it was just because you were asking for more money than you were able to raise?
There are a lot of reasons, but that was a big one.
Okay. What other reasons? I guess that's an interesting topic. I think for me is what other reasons do you think it didn't work out?
Right, so like there's too much money, failure to organize, early pledging to get momentum to make it look good, and then I think we didn't get as much exposure as we should have the first time around.
I believe, in my opinion, the biggest reason for any Kickstarter to fund or not fund is reach, exposure,
Yep.
getting the
Word of mouth.
Because I mean, it's called crowdfunding, right? You need a crowd, and I've listened to some people, have podcasts and whatever. This guy Seth Godin, I think he does business stuff, and he always talks about building your tribe. So you want build an audience, build a tribe, and then you put something up to sale, and then you got a bunch of people who are potentially interested because you've got a bunch of people that know about it. A lot of the people, like Dice Hate Me Games, for example, that's a few years ago didn't even really exist, and then they were all of a sudden they were a small publisher doing some Kickstarters to raise money for their games, and then they did really well, and now they're a name, and then they've merged now with Greater Than Games. How did they manage that? Well, for starters, Chris Kirkman had a blog and a podcast, and a bunch of people that knew who he was and listened to his stuff. He had State of Games podcast and his Dice Hate Me blog had an audience, so that was a good head start. What I usually tell people when I'm on these panels and people are looking for Kickstarter advice, one of the big pieces of advice is before you even start, and this might be too late for you guys and possibly too late for you unless you reboot, and you may or may not need to reboot, but when you go into it, it's really good, and this ties into your momentum comment, to have the audience built already. So, for people who are thinking maybe I'll do a Kickstarter in the future, my advice is usually start. Okay, you're going to do it in the future. Start now, building it. Posting something, post a blog, have a podcast, do whatever it is you do. Whatever you do, start sharing it and find people that care, and then you'll build that tribe. And then when it comes time to kickstart something, you have a group of people you can tell, and that you can grow that group hopefully as big or as strong as you can. And the better you do that, the bigger the head start. As a big example of that, who saw the Exploding Kittens Kickstarter? They made $8 million for what a lot of people that I know that are on Board Game Geek thought was a shitty little Uno ripoff, like a game, like a little card game. It's actually a lot more fun than people were giving credit for. But they made $8 million. How'd they make $8 million? They didn't make $8 million selling a little card game. They made $8 million because they're the oatmeal, and they had some tchotchke, and it says the oatmeal on it, and they have a bazillion people who like the webcomic. So they didn't make $8 million because their game was awesome. They made $8 million because they had a following, large following, and it was only a $20. Like, oh, I like the oatmeal. I'll chip in $20 for this thing. Maybe I'll even like it. Actually, and I've played that. It's actually a lot better than some of the naysayers.
That's not bad.
We're saying.
It's one thing, like whenever I ever back someone on Kickstarter, I'm like, hey, by the way, I run a podcast. Let me know if you want me to throw it out there. Yeah. Magi Monsters. It's basically D&D with Pokemon put together. Great little game. It's going to be out next year. Back to them, put them on the podcast. We got something like 4,000 listens all over the world.
I mean, 4,000 listens is better than 0 listens, right? We had TMG had I forget which game it was. It might have been Coin Age I think it was Ground Floor. We did a game with Ground Floor. It's a big, expensive game. It's like 6 players, up to 6 players, 2 or 3 hour Euro-style game. It was doing all right. As one of the high stretch-goals, Mike decided he was going to give a whole nother game, like a little $30 game for free if we got to $100,000. $100,000 was ridiculous. I didn't think we were going to get there, and we were gonna at first, but then we were getting towards the end of the campaign, and Penny Arcade, the guy from Penny Arcade, not Mike, but the other one, Jerry Hulkins, posted something about it. It wasn't even that much. It was like a side note. Oh, by the way, this cool thing I thought was neat was this. Whatever. He posted about it. I think it was this campaign. That was like the last week of our project. Immediately, bam! A whole bunch of money came in because Penny Arcade has a huge following, and I don't know how I guess they happened upon it and thought it was cool and mentioned it. Bam! So that's what we're talking about. That's now looking at my project or our project, the expansion. So why did the expansion do well? We had, I guess maybe it was only 2,000 copies of the base game that came out like 2 years ago and sold out. So in theory, there are 2,000 games out there, people out there that have the game. Some of those people liked the game and would be interested in the Kickstarter. And presumably, they got notified of it because, hey, Kickstarter people who bought this game, here's maybe you'd be interested in an expansion. Now, it's been 2 years and it's been sold out this whole time. We never reprinted it. Maybe people lost interest, right? Compared to the Scoville one, which was only like, I don't know, 6 months or a year ago that the game came out, and then there's an expansion, and maybe it's still fresh. That could be, that's a possible reason. Another possible reason, some people were saying that we asked for too much money. $30,000 was a lot to ask for.
I thought it was 40. Was it 40?
I thought it was 30, maybe it was 40, whichever it was.
Yeah.
Whichever it was, we were asking for that much money specifically for, and it was only a $25 item. Like, you're trying to sell a bunch of, how many $25 items you have to get to $40,000 or $30,000.
Like 1,600.
Now, there was also a pledge where you could get the base game also, and I actually thought this would work out okay because there seemed to be some demand for the base game reprint. Here it is, and an expansion. You get either or both, whatever. You might. I'm a little surprised that more people. Maybe we didn't maybe we didn't get the word out. Maybe not enough people realized they could get the base game here, because people were, some of in the comments you often get suggestions and commentary as to why some things aren't going well, and some people were suggesting that we were asking for too much money for a $25 item, and I was like, well, no one's buying the base game. Another comment was, well, the base game is effectively getting the base game for $40. Well, you could get the base game for $40 online anyway, if it's a $60 game, by the way. So why should I buy it now? Well, the answer is so it funds and we can make the expansion. But no, people don't necessarily care about that. And once it failed, we actually considered maybe just not making it at all and being like, people seem to think these things are going to automatically happen. Maybe they don't, right? Maybe we show them what they don't. Instead, what we're going to do is we're not going to do it anyway. We're going to do it anyway, but not until we have money, which means we're not, in a year and a half from now, maybe.
It's back burner.
2017 or something.
Yeah. So it's just like, all right, we'll do it ourselves, but you got to wait until we get money now. And it sucks for us. It sucks for people who wanted it, but I'm not sure that's the best. I don't know if that's best or not best. It's just, kind of an unfortunate situation. Another reason we might not have done so well, and this has always been, people are always saying, oh, there's so many things on Kickstarter. It so happened that when we launched the project, like 80 other projects launched that day. 80 other game projects launched. There are so many game projects out there. Maybe it's finally getting watered down. I'm not certain what you can do about that. Some people advertise ahead of time when they're going to launch. I think that's not, if you have a tribe to tell, I think that's not a bad idea. But if how do you can't follow all those. You don't necessarily know, and they don't necessarily say. And every once in a while you'll launch, and at the same time, Cool Mini or Not launches some minis project the same day, and they overshadow you or something. On the one hand, maybe that brings more people to Kickstarter and they'll see your game. On the other hand, maybe people are thinking about your game and thinking about this game and decide, I'll buy this one, rather than both. I don't know what the effect is there, but that could have affected us as well. The fact that there were so many projects that launched at just the same time. So those are some of the things that we were thinking might have caused us to have a problem. So let's go back to you. You said you need $10,000. What do you think what are you planning on doing? What do you think you might do to try to improve your reach and kind of reach this number of people you'll need?
Dr. Jonathan, I've been trying to find marketing companies. Okay, scratch it. I haven't had any trouble finding marketing companies. They're finding me. However, finding out if they're reliable, if they actually do anything. They don't.
If they're legit.
I'm very skeptical in general, and every time someone emails me and says, "Hey, we can help you with your SEO or whatever on your website," or "Hey, we can let's trade advertising. We'll advertise your Kickstarter, and you can advertise ours," and I'm like, "Who are you?" So I'm very skeptical of people who contact me, but it might be because I'm not a fan of salesmen. And the one time I got a telemarketing call for like the call you ask them, do you want a loan or you want to refinance your house? And usually I'm like, no. Why would I? If I wanted to refinance my house, I'd call you. Well, one time I did want to refinance my house. I got a telemarketing call and said, hey, you want to, and I was like, as a matter of fact, I do want to refinance my house. And I went through this whole process, and I was all proud of myself, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be better, I'm going to get a lower rate. And I'm like, look at me, I'm an adult, and I did this. And I went and called my dad, and I'm like, look at me. And my dad was like, so he started asking questions like, hey, what fee did they charge for this? And what did this? And I'm like, I don't know. Oh, crap. And it turned out it was kind of a ripoff. And so luckily they have this thing where you can cancel those things like within 2 days or whatever. And so we canceled it, and then my dad took me to like the people who had already financed my loan and taught me how to actually do it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that just reinforced my prior decision thought, which was that you don't want telemarketers, right? So anyone that contacts you and says we can advertise your thing, I'd be skeptical of.
Be wary.
So
the people who want to like cross promote with you, if they're like, we had a few small campaigns that we mentioned, that we mutually mentioned in our updates. We actually got a few backers from them.
Yeah,
but, like,
cross promotion is a bit different, but
yeah,
The back
but
scratching.
if, like a campaign like my size wanted to like cross promote with a campaign your size, that wouldn't really be fair.
yeah, it's not like an equitable thing, right? Like
yeah.
But what do you do? I mean, like, how else? I mean, if I've seen it happen though. I've seen people say, oh, usually it's like, here's your regular update, and at the bottom it's like, oh, by the way, my buddy, or I've played this game and I see it's on Kickstarter now and it's pretty cool, and they might mention it. Like Jamie Stegmaier might say that about some, I don't know, some other game that he's seen. And that's cross promotion. I feel like it's a little bit different than saying, hey,
Yeah.
I'll give me $100 and I'll market for
Oh
you.
yeah, those guys are.
The people asking for money for
Delete that email.
are
Yeah.
probably not worth it. Sorry, but I interrupted you. What else you got?
So I got a friend who has a gaming group. It's video gaming and role playing, and he's got about 500 people in that, and a second nerd group that's 300 people. And
That's a good number of people.
I've made friends with him, and so he's letting me do a lot to promote it on his thing.
That's cool. There's a lot of people. On the downside, it's not 100% overlap with your audience because they're video gamers, right? But there might be some decent
Yeah.
overlap. So that could be helpful. So hopefully that'll work out. Have you attempted to find? So one thing that a lot of people, some people charge for, some people don't, are these video reviews.
Mhm.
Have you looked into trying to get one of these video reviewers to review your game?
I have not.
So you might look into that. Some of the issues here are like everyone wants that. Everyone wants their game, especially the big ones like Richard Hamm and Tom Vassell. So some of these places like charge for the service. In some cases, it's worth it. In some cases, it might or might not be worth it. Especially if you think they're going to give it a good review because it's their kind of game. I think the Dice Tower charges. Richard Hamm doesn't charge, but he has specific things like it's got to work well for two players because he only plays with his wife. He's very enthusiastic. People like him a lot, but if he doesn't like it, if he doesn't sound like he'd like it, he just won't do it because he doesn't want to waste time playing a game he doesn't like. It has to work well for two players because he only plays with his wife and stuff like that. So if you I would think the reviewers don't necessarily want like a form letter or I don't know you, but will you review my thing? I hear you're popular. Rather, you want to send it to somebody you think would like it first of all, and still I'm not actually sure how to go about that. We have a few of that are friends with Undead Viking is a friend of like Mike and I. We have met him and we know him and he likes our stuff, and so we might send him a game to review. And he doesn't charge for them, I don't think, but that's just an example. Like Tom Vassell, they charge for stuff. Back in the day, before this was a thing, when Eminence Domain was going to be on Kickstarter, I asked. Kickstarter previews weren't a thing; they didn't exist. Nobody did them. Nobody had heard of them. So I contacted Tom Vassell. I'm like, hey, would you do a review of my prototype of my game? I'm going to try to get some crowdfunding. I feel like it's going to take time. I'll pay you, and I offered to pay him $100. And I almost felt dirty. I sent him the prototype. I opened the prototype. I sent a $100 bill inside. I'm like, it almost felt dirty. But just the way I was doing that. But I thought it was legit. He'd take some time and effort to do it. And he did it. He did a review. I'm sure it didn't hurt. And again, this was before Kickstarter was a thing. It was one of the first big Kickstarters. Who knows how much that review helped? Or I'm sure it helped. It didn't hurt. And then when the game came out, he did another like a regular review of it. And he said that he had had done a review before, whatever, and he's like, well, let's do it. And he raved about the artwork and stuff, which was nice. And it turned out he liked the game a lot, which was nice. So we got a nice review out of that. And it cost me $100, probably well worth it. Nowadays, though, they have policies. They have price, like the Dice Tower is a big thing, and they have everyone and their mother wanting them to do their reviews. I don't even know how to get in touch with them anymore. But yeah, that's a good way to reach lots of people. You might want to look into those and which ones might help you or might be good, and find out what their policies are. You might just ask them.
Yeah.
Because they're usually individuals who are gamers and approachable and will tell you, and they might tell you, I don't do that, or they might tell you, what's your game about, and let me know. And
there's a lot of bloggers and podcasters out there that'll do it for free. It's like, just send me a copy, I'll play it.
And then and some of them have like four followers, and some have hundreds of followers, and so you never know. But even if it's only four, if you're on a tight budget, sending a review copy to someone who's got a low audience,
it's not a good return.
It's not high on the priority list necessarily, but I don't know.
You can it's pretty common to ask pay for postage back.
Yeah,
you could ask them to replace.
We didn't end up doing that, but then after our campaign, I read just use postage, send it back.
Yeah, here's a prepaid label, and
because what are they going to do with it anyway?
Yeah. Most of them they'll either put it in their closet or throw it out.
Yeah, usually it's a do the game, do the review. It's a one shot, and okay,
That's
now what?
That's a good point. Another thing you could consider, I don't know how tech savvy you are. I in theory could do this, but I'm bad at it. Is you could do a how to play video or something like that yourself, or if you think you're not personal, get a personable friend to do it and film them or something. That's a possibility as well. Just to people learn better, or it'll show off the components and stuff. It'll show off the game a little better, and you can do things like that. But again, even whether you do that or not, the key is whether or not people see it. So if I were you, looking for $10,000, I would concentrate on getting the word out, right? And it might be the case, just to, maybe you already know this, but just to kind of warn you, it might well be the case that a month goes by and you haven't gotten anywhere near your $10,000, and you have to decide whether you're going to cancel or let it fail, and then whether you're going to relaunch or what you're going to do. Like these guys, it failed or you canceled, either way.
Well, it would have failed.
It would have failed, so you canceled. I'm not sure what the strategy is there. I'm not sure it makes a difference.
Someone told me it'll show up on Google as failed if you don't cancel it.
Right.
And if you cancel it, it won't show up on Google.
Right, which you might not want people to associate the word failed with your project or something like that. So in that case, I mean another one that I thought was doing well just yesterday or today canceled. It was called Campaign Trail, and it looked like a cool game, and I didn't really follow it, but I had the impression it was doing all right. And they go, we're not going to make it, we're going to cancel and not waste your time. And I was like, oh, too bad. So I don't know if they're going to re-up it later, or if they're just going to, I'm sure they are, because they have been working on that thing forever. But yeah, so it might be the case that you make your funding goal and everything's fine, but just to, everyone should be prepared for the worst, right? And running a Kickstarter, I mean, can be a lot of work. Sometimes it can be expensive, depending on how much artwork you buy for it or whatever. But it can be a really big learning experience too. Any other? Have you found doing a project that wasn't a physical product? You find
it was a little difficult with coming up with the whole what the rewards are, because it's one of those. It's not. I wish it was something tangible, because that way I could easily just say, here's this thing. It's more of okay, how do I value what is something that I can't really make tangible?
Yeah.
And
on the downside, though, if it's physical, you have to mail it.
And then the mailing cranks it up, and
So.
And then the unexpected shipping costs.
Some people really lose their shirt on shipping costs.
European.
They miscalculate it, or it comes in heavier than they thought, and therefore it costs more. Actually, those microgame projects from TMG, several of them were. One was the envelope was bigger than the allowable dimension for the price that he thought it was. One was heavier than it was supposed to be. One was, there was a lot more shipping charges than what was expected, because there was some miscalculations going on or something like that. But if you don't have to ship stuff, some video games, the downside of video games is it costs a lot of money to pay the people that do it, to make it. But the upside is it's free to deliver.
Yeah.
So
digital download, save a mint on shipping.
So that one of the big downsides of the board game industry is shipping. Shipping costs a lot, and you have to do it. It has to, realistically, you got to manufacture in like China or something, and you got to ship stuff across the ocean. Not only does it cost a lot of money, but it takes a lot of time. If there was a better way to do that, I would like to know it. But anyway, so and I don't know if the topic that I just picked out of air was whether Kickstarter was still a thing. I don't know that we've stayed on topic, but also I don't know that it matters. I guess in the end, it does seem like Kickstarter is still a thing.
Still there.
People are still using it. You've just recently funded.
Yep.
You've just recently funded. You're using it now. Whether it's clearly still out there. There are still projects that are funding, and it might be that some people have said that some of the big companies like your Cool Mini or Not or Queen or whatever, and some people have included TMG in that, and some people have not, depending on your point of view, I guess, who have come in there and have like dominated the scene and made it very difficult for you guys to get any funding. I agree with that, disagree with that. It might be. I kind of think that like that might be true to an extent. It's not. I don't think that's impossible for a small publisher to get funded. I just think you might have to. It's difficult for us, a small independent person to get
The attention.
$50,000 maybe to compete with the big guys. But if you're making your own small thing, maybe you're not competing as much. It might be that you need to take a different approach for that to work.
Yeah, the only thing I think it really does is that it doesn't like just take the backers. Doesn't like just take all the backers. I think Kickstarter will rank like things like featured things based on popularity, and so like
people who have a big reach,
will
look popular,
be,
and therefore will be at the top of the feature.
Yeah, and then they'll get more popular.
Therefore, they succeed.
But-
Therefore, Kickstarter gets its cut.
Right. So Kickstarter is.
It's certainly in Kickstarter's best interest to do that.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people come. Well, I guess there are analytics for this. I just haven't seen them. How much does people browse Kickstarter and say, "Oh, a feature? I'm gonna do it." Do you have a number?
No, I don't. But that's what I was about to conclude with. Is like you're supposed to bring your own crowd.
Yeah, ideally, you can't. And this is one of the things that people have been saying about Kickstarter from the beginning is like you really can't count on Kickstarter to fund your project. People have to know about it, and it's on you to do that. Kickstarter's not going to go find people. Once in a while, some small percentage of your backers might be cruising Kickstarter and being like, "Oh, look at what's that featured." Even if you get featured by Kickstarter, that's not going to bring in enough people to fund your project.
On the first 3 days and the last 3 days, it's you're in that sort by ending soonest or started most recently, so that's
So you might
The big rush.
People might find you that way.
Yeah,
But even then though, like even on the maximum number of people finding you on Kickstarter is not enough people to fund your project, right? So you really can't count on Kickstarter to find people for you. That's probably the biggest number one thing for someone who's considering
The misnomer.
Have you ever considered Kickstarting anything? Or running a Kickstarter for any reason?
No. Personal anecdote though, I can tell you that when I have been to Kickstarter, it has never been the browse. Like I always get there because I'm going directly
Specific
to some campaign
project. Yeah.
that I've heard about elsewhere.
Right. Yeah, and I think there are a large number of people that do that. There are some people that browse, and I don't know how many people are in each of those groups. But even when you're browsing, like you're not going to see all the projects because not all featured or whatever. I'm sure. I would suspect the number of people who browse is not as good as or not as big as the people who don't browse.
Yeah, usually on mine it's, hey, a friend on Facebook shared that they backed this
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
and I'm like, hey, just check it out.
That's how you.
That's
like,
is the networking.
So, yeah, I don't know. Anyone have any other comments or questions to
Well,
that?
like, if Kickstarter is not a thing, how else do you get a game out?
Well, at one point Kickstarter wasn't a thing, and people got by pulling money out of their pocket or by borrowing it from the bank, right?
Lots of risk.
That one of the great things about crowdfunding is that it removes that risk. You don't have to put up your money and risk losing your house, or you're out $50,000 and you've got a garage full of like boxes like you don't know what to do with, right? Like that's the kind of thing people did. People thought, oh, my game is great, I'm going to print it, I'm going to do it, and they shell out money they saved up for, or they take a loan or something like that,
Find
and they
investors.
manufacture it, and they don't know what to do next, and it's in their garage, and they break even or don't, maybe the company goes under. Like this happened all the time. Now that there's Kickstarter, there is a way to do it without that kind of risk. But it's still possible to, like I said, Tasty Minstrel failed that Kickstarter. We might still print that game. We'll just wait until we have money to do so, right? That money will come in as we sell other games and make some profit. Eventually, we'll be like, all right, we got enough money. Let's print this game now. Or
it sounds like what your point of like is still a thing is like it's not what it used to be, but it's still a big thing, but it's
But it can
very different, right?
can it still be used for what it was intended?
Right.
maybe, yeah, I'm not 100% sure what I meant by that, so it's whatever it means to you, I guess. How's that? I'll make it existential.
Well,
What is
I was
it?
wondering myself, and that's why I came.
Right.
Yeah.
To find out.
Well, yeah, like from like you guys, yeah, Kickstarter.
Yeah, well, it's definitely changed. It's constantly changing, and I do think that it's still a thing. I would say it's still a thing, but I think people have to adapt and how they're going to use it.
Yeah, it's more like a pre-order system now.
Well, and again, we're talking. I'll preface. We're talking about the small sector that is board games for the most part, and tangentially related. Where there are other things. I've got people complain that board games are late all the time, and they are late all the time. And that's true. For some reason, no one's figured out how to accurately determine how long it takes to do things, and there are reasons for that. But I've got a few non-board game projects that I'm waiting for from Kickstarter. I've got a pair of Bluetooth earphones that are supposed to be cool. I've got a 3D printer, a unibody 3D printer, which sounds like it could be cool. I've got some kind of a USB charger keychain type thing that may or may not be cool, but I thought I could use a USB keychain. All three of those are over a year late, and I'm not necessarily surprised. These are people who aren't in the business of manufacturing earphones and are figuring out how to engineer and manufacture an earphone that's a battery and some technology and whatever. And there's a lot of pieces, right? They might know what they're doing, but they haven't done it before. They're getting together. They've started companies to do this. They've re-engineered it,
And they're doing it on scale.
yeah, and then they got to make a bazillion of them. And I'll probably get it eventually, but each of those is over a year late. Board games, they're frequently 6 months late or something like that. Sometimes they're a year or two late, but that's usually a outlier. But there are so many other uses. Like the percentage. Actually, board games has become a relatively large percentage of Kickstarter's thing. I understand, but it's still not a majority, right?
Yeah, like technology is a big one, and then like video games.
Well, especially if you're by dollars, because technology costs a lot. Video games cost a lot, right? So, but even if it's by project or whatever, or number of backers, for example, that would be a neat metric, like project genre by number of backers.
Yeah.
Board games is pretty big, and I think it's because it's gotten so big and so useful. It does take a big chunk of Kickstarter's whatever stuff, but I don't think it's a majority. There's a bunch of other things out there, people funding movies, people funding albums, whatever. So it's good to remember that we're only talking about a subset of Kickstarter here when we say this. But yeah, I think it certainly requires an adjustment to the way we've done. You can't just. I think that a couple of the projects that Tasty Minstrel has done have sort of proven that you can't just press the button and watch the money roll in, right?
Yeah.
And not only is this Kickstarter that we just did fail to fund, and that was a surprise, I thought. But another one that was a surprise was City Hall, which is a game that first the designer had put it on Kickstarter and failed, and then Tasty Minstrel picked it up, put it on Kickstarter, and I honestly thought there was no way it was going to fail. However, we proved that if you half-ass a big Kickstarter project and you don't promote it properly, nobody will care, and then it'll not fail, it'll not fund. So we failed that one, and then we're like, oh, I guess we need to not slack off. We actually have to pay attention to what we're doing. And then we put a third Kickstarter, that game's third Kickstarter. We combined it with another game actually, and then it funded, and we got the games out. But that's another good example of it. No matter how successful you've been already on Kickstarter, and Tasty Minstrel's had some successful projects, 20 successful projects or something like that, and they're big following now, and some people just buy everything Tasty Minstrel does because we're awesome. But even then, you can't just be like, oh, here's a Kickstarter, and go to sleep and wake up in the morning and get money. It doesn't work that way. There's Jamie Stegmaier does a great job of communicating with his backers and running Kickstarter projects, and he's written a lot of stuff and a lot of blogs and if you haven't read Jamie's blogs and stuff on Kickstarter, and you're running a project, you should absolutely go read them. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you read them?
No.
I mentioned it yesterday. It's Stonemeyer Games.
Okay, yeah, so I got the link.
Yeah, you should absolutely read his stuff. It is very good, and you should certainly know. Another person that's posted a lot on the subject is James Matthew from Minion Games, and it's funny because he's definitely a different kind of guy than Jamie, a different kind of attitude. But he's got a lot. He's posted a lot of Kickstarter lessons, or lessons he's learned the hard way by doing it. So that's search for Minion Games, or I think he had a blog called Kicking and Screaming, which was about Kickstarter lessons. I'm not sure, but if you Googled around, you can probably find it. And who else? What other blogs about Kickstarter? There's a podcast from a guy named Richard Bliss called Funding the Dream, which I don't think he's been doing it lately, but he had a lot of episodes when Kickstarter was a thing where he would talk, and they're short, like 20-minute episodes, interviewing people like Jamie, people like Patrick Nickel from Crash Games, people like Michael Mendez, who have run successful projects, and mostly in the board game space, and that's got some great information too. So I feel like if you're running a Kickstarter project and you haven't done this research, like, you should go do it, because it can't hurt, and it can only help. If it turns out that you don't end up funding and you decide to reroute, I would definitely study what those guys said and stuff, and use that to inform your future stuff. Of course, like I said, if the money rolls in and you fund,
Awesome.
whatever. You instead research what to do next, right? What time is it?
It's 150.
150.
Oh, okay. So we're getting low on time. Any other sort of last minute topics or questions? Anyone? Hopefully this was kind of helpful and or informative, or at least entertaining kind of chat.
Well, so what's like your best? We talked about finding, reaching a crowd and building a tribe and stuff. Obviously, Michael might be better to answer this, but
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good question. So there are ways. The way Michael did it was he started. Actually, how did Michael do it? If you look at Michael Mendez posted some stuff, transparent stuff, like when he was going through the process of how he was trying to do stuff, and you could probably find that if you looked hard enough. So like I said, Chris Kirkman did it by having a blog for years ahead of time. Jamie Stegmeyer might have done something similar. Basically, so how do you do it? You find something that you can provide, something that you can start a blog or start a podcast or post on Board Game Geek about strategy for 7 years, like I did. Just become known in some format by some people.
Start communicating.
However you can, right? Some part of Tasty Mitchell's success may have come from the fact that not on purpose, but I was on BGG for 10 years a lot. I was vocal, I talked about various things, I asked questions about games, or I commented on games, or made strategy posts, or whatever it was I was doing. I was around, people kind of knew who I was. Some people, not all people. And with my name associated with TMG, it got a little more reach. So I didn't have a blog necessarily. I do have a blog, but no one reads it. But my tribe or whatever was not because I have a blog or a podcast, but it's because I was communicating with all these people on this website that's all about games for a decade, right? I've been around.
No, people read your blog. Remember that one? Was that one guy you mentioned read your blog and commented or whatever?
Oh yeah. Two people read my blog. One of them sitting right there.
Famous people.
Did you back him on Kickstarter?
Have you backed stuff?
I don't think I backed any TMG stuff on Kickstarter. But I'm also not sure that I was reading your blog at the time when TMG was getting started.
Yeah, and I didn't necessarily. Well, whenever we had a thing, I'd be like, I probably put a blog post on a blog about it, like, hey, we got this Kickstarter thing. Certainly with Eminence Domain, I'm sure I did. And usually when we have a new Kickstarter, I'm like, oh, by the way, TMG Kickstarter, my 4 followers or whatever might get this. I'm kidding. More people read it than that. I know because I get 6 commenters on once in a while. But my point is, it's not like a widespread blog. But so I didn't purposely build the tribe in order to do a Kickstarter. But just being on Board Game Geek for 10 years, people knew who I was a little bit. So if you have if you have something to say, or if you can think of something to say, start saying it, and then and share it around. Get on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, and you're a designer, get on Twitter and start meeting. There's a design community on Twitter made up of people like your Dice Hate Me people, and your and their buddies, and your TC Petties, and your Daryl Lauder, and your Ben Rossett, and Gil Hova. Gil Hova just recently, he is a designer type. He had a game published called Prolix, which is a word game, and more recently Battle Merchants, which is a strategy game. And he decided he wanted the publisher to do stuff a little bit differently, so he decided to start publishing. So he recently made a company called Formal Ferret Games, and right now, I think he just funded his second game called The Networks. And he did a really good job of communication too, and somehow, I'm not sure how he did it, but he apparently has a decently loyal following, and has had no trouble funding his Networks game just now, last month or whatever.
Did he also sell Bad Medicine?
Yes, that was his first one. So he funded that on Kickstarter, and that worked out. And I thought it was a little bit crazy to start publishing in the first place, because he's a designer, and I'm like, I'm not sure you're going to want to be a publisher, but he said he wanted to. And I'm like, okay, great. And then I'm not sure he wanted to start with Bad Medicine, because he wants to make strategy games, and Bad Medicine is a party game. And I'm like, are you sure you want to start with Bad Medicine and then try to do strategy games? I would have advised against it. In fact, I did advise against it, but whatever, he did it. It seemed to work out. He successfully funded Bad Medicine, and now he successfully funded his first strategy game. I don't know what's in the future, but he seems to have, between the two, and now he's done some work. He went to not just local cons, but he's gone to various cons around, to try to spread the reach. And he sent, Richard Ham did a run through of his game, and I don't know what other reviewers might have, but he's done like a lot of footwork to try to get the game out there ahead of the Kickstarter, and he might have a little head start because he had a game come out from Minion Games, and in fact, Prolix the Battle Merchants, people might have known him from there a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's a little that's one way you can do it, is publish a game with get a game signed by a publisher. I guess that's not trivial, as it turns out. But so yeah, find some way to contribute something that people are interested in, and then people will start listening to you, and then you can kind of cater to them and grow that group, and then be like, hey guys, you like me, you like what I have to say, here's my game on Kickstarter. And like I said, the Twitter community, get in with them, because it's kind of everyone's friendly, everyone's friends, and everyone shares each other's stuff, and that helps you get into a social network you can share with. And honestly, a lot of people don't dig Twitter, but if you're trying to be a game designer or a publisher, it's worth having a Twitter account just to get into that community, and you can you don't have to friend everybody, right? But so that's some advice that could work. I can't really think of anything else. All right. Cool. Well, hopefully that was, like I said, informative or at least entertaining. And now it is time to be 2:00.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for coming by. Hey. I wonder, is Kickstarter thing maybe the
That's weird, man.
well, I mean, I'll note that this panel wasn't, the panels that we've done have not been super well advertised, and this is maybe a mini lesson in Kickstarter. The panels at this convention weren't really advertised that well, even to the people at this convention, and therefore, perhaps not a lot of people showed up,
Yeah.
right? I'm not really
People
sure.
signed up when I saw. Yeah. Yeah.
They walked by and went, but there's a really cool game going on right now.
It's possible. I'm not too surprised. And last year it was low too. A couple of years ago, people came to the Kickstarter thing because I think Kickstarter was such a popular.
Oh yeah.
Such a thing.
It became the new hot thing.
Hi guys! If you're a fan of reading like I am, and you've been looking to try out audible.com for audiobooks, we have a link for a free 30-day trial. So go ahead and check out audibletrial.com/Creative Play and Podcast Network. That's Audible, audibletrial.com/Creative Play and Podcast Network. Thanks!
Hey guys, Mark Cato from Tucson Games and Gadgets. Want to tell you a little bit about what's going on here today at RinCon, where you guys should be. I hope you're going to be coming this coming year if it's coming up. We come here to RinCon because we want to meet all the people here in Tucson that we play games with in our store. And of course, RinCon, you're going to be finding all of this stuff right on the tables and have a lot of fun. It's amazing. I hope you're here. Hope we're going to see you soon.
So where can people go when they're not at RinCon to play games?
Come on down to Tucson Games and Gadgets at 2900 East Broadway. You won't be disappointed.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. And feel free to enjoy our other shows, such as D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Scion Ragnarok and Roll, a Scion hero to Ragnarok story. Thank you for listening.